the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program Phase 2, or MPEP Phase 2. This is a webinar for Vermont businesses who are interested in applying. Really happy to have Dave Carter with us and Mariah Knopf. I'll let them introduce themselves. But I'll introduce myself first. I'm Julia Shire. I use she, her pronouns. I work for the Agency of Agriculture, helping to do a little bit of a conduiting and networking of folks to support them in making this application. And maybe I'll turn it over to Mariah first and then to Dave for an introduction to dive right in.
Awesome. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, my name is Mariah Knopf. Really glad to be here. And thanks, Julia and Dave, for being part of putting this together. I work for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board and manage our Rural Economic Development Initiative, which we use short form READY for that program. And I'll probably talk a little bit more about this later at the end of Dave's presentation, but basically our program can support working lands businesses with grant assistance for these large federal programs. And I'll share a little bit more about that later on.
Great. And I'm Dave Carter. I'm one of the regional directors with the Flower Hill Institute, which a lot of folks have never heard about, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But we have been working now since March of 2022 to really help people with technical assistance on meat and poultry processing expansion. Just my background is I've been involved in agriculture for about 45 years. I spent 25 with the Farmers Union Organization, 20 with the National Bison Association, and did a lot of consulting work on everything from meat processing to importing organic cheddar cheese. So with that, I am pleased to have this opportunity to visit with folks today and present some information on the phase 2 of the Meat and Poultry Processing Expansion Program. And I really want to commend the Vermont Department of Agriculture and the Housing and Conservation Board. They have reached out and have been working with us continuously for the last several months on not only this grant, but previous grants to make sure that we're getting information out to Vermont producers as much as possible. So with that, I am going to start in and we'll walk through a discussion on this latest grant that was announced and is now open for producers. So the first couple of slides, I kind of call this a report from Captain Obvious, because I think most of the folks that are on this webinar are very familiar with what happened. So we have this extreme concentration going on in the meat and poultry processing industries. You got 80% of the beef and 55% of the chickens all under ownership by 4 companies. COVID came along a couple of years ago and really exposed the weakness of that system. We saw, producers, hog producers, poultry producers having to euthanize animals. We saw empty grocery store shelves. We saw, the COVID was sweeping through these plants. And so there was really exposed a need for a more resilient food system. So the Biden administration came in and made $1 billion commitment to creating what they call a more resilient, diverse, and equitable meat and poultry processing system. And they realized that this had to be more than just throwing some grants out to the countryside. If they just, opened up grants without any support, that was going to be a recipe for disaster. And they also knew that it wasn't just about building processing plants, it's about developing successful marketing enterprises. So to that end, they brought together a network of organizations to provide technical assistance to folks that are involved in trying to access or accessing USDA grants and loans. And the Flower Hill Institute was brought on to play the coordination role of this technical assistance program. So the network consists of several organizations. There's the Niche Meat Processors Assistance Network out of Oregon State University, the Intertribal Agricultural Council, American Association of Meat Processors, which I always like to say they're the largest association of meat processors, but they don't represent the large meat processors. They represent everyone else. There's American Meat Science Association and the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, both of which really focus on helping us develop new markets, new uses for meats, byproducts, and everything else. And then more recently, Tuskegee University came on as an official provider, technical assistance provider, really helping us to reach out to the historically Black colleges and universities and underserved producers in the Southeast. And then we also have MOU partnerships with 18 organizations ranging from Farmer Veteran Coalition to Women in Ranching, Latino Farmers and Ranchers, really to help us have this outreach and to bring the resources to as many people as possible. So the areas of support that we have available to folks is, first of all, the funding technical assistance. That's what we're up to our eyebrows in right now, is there's so many grants being offered, grants and loans and other programs, that we're working to make sure that folks have the access to this technical assistance to apply for and to receive these grants. But we have three other areas that are very important. Number one is ag business development, working with projects, with businesses, with producers to develop a viable business plan, business model, and to help them put that together for not only processing, but marketing their products. The third area is the technical and operational support. What kind of facility is right? Do you need bricks and mortar? Do you want to look at a modular? What do you need to do in terms of the equipment and getting into distribution? And then the third is the supply chain development. Everything from how do you source the animals and how do you time all of that to how do you get that product into the market? So to date, as I said, we've been focused primarily on the federal funding because there have been so many grants out there. There have been 2 rounds of the meat and poultry inspection readiness grants, helping folks get ready and to come under USDA inspection. There's been the first round of the meat and poultry processing expansion program. There's the meat processing intermediary lending program, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. There's been workforce training. And of course, there's the annual grants that come around, the value-added producers, the farmers market promotion, the local food promotion. There's also the Rural Energy for America program grant that is open right now, that is available to folks that are trying to bring in energy conserving technologies into their processing facilities. Then we've had the local meat capacity grant and the indigenous animal harvesting grant, both which closed in July, and we're waiting for those to come out. But the one that's open right now is the second phase of the meat and poultry processing expansion program. So let's get into the weeds here as quickly as we can. First of all, USDA Rural Development has committed $123 million to this second phase of the program. And this is to help eligible processors expand processing capacity. And that's important. I'll talk about that in a couple other times. And they have partnered with the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund to administer this program. So their applications will be going into USDA, but when the awards come out and the administration, New Hampshire Community Loan Fund will be working with rural development to administer that part of it. This application is open until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, November 22nd. Now, if you look at your calendar, you'll see that November 22nd is the day before Thanksgiving. And that's one of the reasons that we're encouraging folks, get to work, get this application in early. You do not want to be trying to find letters of support or get information from your financial institution, 2 days before Thanksgiving when everybody's already taken off for the long holiday weekend. This grant will have to go in to grants.gov. The first round of MPEP, you were allowed to submit a paper copy to your state rural development office. This one, it has to go in through grants.gov. And they have made it very clear that anything that comes in outside of grants.gov or comes in after 11:59 p.m. on the 22nd will not be considered. So we got to get busy. We got to get our work done. Now, the program that they have is offering awards of up to $10 million or 30% of your total project cost, whichever is less. Now, the minimum award is $250,000. So if you do the math on this, that in order to apply for the $250,000 one, that would be 30% of a project that's $834,000. And so that's sort of the minimum threshold. The applicants are going to have to cost share with 70% of the money for this project. And I'll talk about some ways that we want to piece that together here in just a few minutes. This is a program that allows you to have 4 years to complete the project, 48 months from when the award is made. And they're estimating that the award is going to be made in April of next year. Now, this program does also have a equipment only facet, but they put the bar pretty darn high on that you'd have to apply for at least $5 million in funding if you're just going for equipment. And again, doing the math, that means you'd be putting in about $17 million worth of equipment. They put that bar purposely high just because the MCAP grant that just closed had the funding to go up to $250,000 for equipment only with no match required. So they're really trying to focus MPEP on facilities, building, new expansion. Now, I want to emphasize that as soon as this webinar is done, if you are not registered in the SAMS system and in grants.gov, it's time to get to work on that. This is something that really hung some folks up on the MCAP process, is that you have to go in and you go into the SAMS system to get your registration. And what happens is when you go in there, the first thing you do is you apply for and you receive a unique entity identifier. And what happened with MCAP was a lot of people went through, they got their UEI and they said, oh, good, I'm good to go. No, you're not. There are some additional steps you need to take once you get your UEI to complete your SAMS registration and get your cage code that puts you in a position to get your application in on grants.gov. Now, this is explained in MPEP in the RFA under section 4.6. But we also at Flower Hill did a specific webinar last Friday on how to get registered in SAMS and how to make sure that you're teed up in grants.gov to file your application. I would encourage people to go back and look at that webinar. It's very helpful. And the reason I emphasize this is sometimes it can take 2 or 3 weeks to go through that process. So if you start that process on November 10th, you're probably going to miss your application deadline. So that's something to get to work on right away. Now, the grant itself is really focused on projects that are technically feasible, financially viable, have other sources of funding available, accommodate different species, and I underline this, expand processing capacity. That is the bottom line on any application, is you have to demonstrate that you are actually expanding processing capacity. Now, this is very open. Just about anybody, any business can apply. They talk about for-profit, nonprofit, co-ops, tribes, governments, and other entities, regardless of legal structure, who currently engage or plan to engage in expanding meat and poultry processing capacity. So the eligibility is very open, unless you're one of the big four, or you're buying 20% of your inputs or providing more than 20% of your outputs to the big four. They are really trying to target this to the smaller processors. You're also not going to be eligible if you can't demonstrate that you're going to clearly expand your processing capacity. That is the bottom line. And if you are just custom exempt or you're non-commercial, you're not going to qualify. And then those folks that have received funding under MPEP 1, MCAP, the Indigenous Animal Harvesting Grant, you're not going to be eligible for this. If you applied for MPEP 1 and did not receive it, you can certainly apply for MPEP 2. Now, I have an asterisk there because a number of people have filed for like MCAP or IAG, and they haven't heard back on that. On MCAP, the Agricultural Marketing Service received probably twice as many applications as they were anticipating. And so they're going through the process of trying to score those and get those out. They wanted to get those out before the end of the fiscal year or the end of this month. I don't know that they're going to be able to make that deadline. So the best I can advise people is if you want to apply for MPEP, go ahead and put in your application. If you applied also for MCAP, if you're lucky enough to get both of them awarded, then you have to make a decision on which one you want to accept. Now, the eligibility requirements, you can be just about any type of business, but you have to show that you process or plan to process anything under the Meat or Poultry Inspection Acts. So that would be your amenable species like cattle, hogs, poultry. I mentioned catfish. They are the only aquatic species that's eligible for inspection. I won't get into the details of why catfish do and salmon don't, but that's the way it is. But you can also are eligible if you process non-amenable species under voluntary FSIS inspection. Those are things like bison, elk, farm deer. You can apply if you're not currently under inspection, but you have to demonstrate that you plan to get a grant of federal inspection. And you have to comply with the National Environmental Policy and the National Historic Preservation Act. Those are two key, and particularly the Environmental Policy Act side. That is in the RFA. You can click on that and it takes you to a checklist of that you'll have to submit with your grant. You don't have to go through your formal, what they call a NEPA review when you submit the grant, but you have to fill out the checklist. And then if you're awarded the grant, then you would have to formally go through your NEPA review. And then I can't repeat often enough that you have to demonstrate that you're increasing slaughter capacity. And that's where folks that do further processing, it's a little bit problematic. If you just say you have a facility and you make jerky, that's all you do, or you smoke, make bacon and hams, and you're just bringing in product from the outside, then you're not going to qualify. You have to also slaughter animals that will provide meat for the further processing. They don't have to provide all of the meat. So let's just say that you're processing some hogs, but your demand for bacon is outstripping your supply. You can bring in some bellies from outside as long as you are also processing your own animals. You have to demonstrate that you'd be increasing the demand for animals and that you're increasing the opportunity for other producers to access value-added markets. Now, a big issue under MPEP 1 was that everybody had to submit a full feasibility study with their project. Well, they backed off that a bit under MPEP 2. If you're an existing business that you've been in business for more than a year, and you just want to expand your processing to do what you're doing. So let's just say you're processing beef and you want to expand the number of animals that you're processing because the market demand that you have is outstripping your ability to process. You don't have to do a feasibility study. However, if you've been in business for less than a year, if you're proposing to expand the number of species that you're processing, if you're establishing a new product line, if you're expanding your business outside of your current market territory, all of those will require a feasibility study. And under the USDA rules, feasibility study has to be done by a qualified third party. Now, they've got a really nice guide. It's a 2-page guide that is available to talk about the feasibility study requirements. So you can click on that. Again, the link is available at section 4.2.3 of the request for applications. Now, if you are doing a brand new business, you're going to probably have to have a full-blown feasibility study. If you are just proposing to start bringing in a smoker and an extruder to do some snack sticks and jerky for your existing business, your feasibility study really needs to just be focused on that additional expansion that you're doing. So the depth of the feasibility study is going to depend on what you're proposing to do. Now, when you get the grant, or when you apply for the grant, the things that are eligible are very wide ranging. So this one is you can build, you can modernize, you can expand facilities. This one, they're very clear that it applies to mobile and modular slaughter units as long as you're going to be processing under inspection. If you're proposing a new facility, it allows you to cover the cost of your real estate, manufacturing equipment, technology, packaging, and labeling. Anything that you need to do for OSHA, for HACCP, for workforce training. They really want to see grants that are going to have an emphasis on reducing your greenhouse gas and otherwise meet the administration's climate smart agriculture goals. You can use the funds for composting and rendering equipment as well. You can use it to help become federally inspected for staffing costs that are tied directly to the proposed project. We'll cover your office help or anything that's not related to that. And even you can use it for the cost of the sign that you have to put outside during the construction to say that this is being funded in part by USDA. So that's, what you can use the funds for. Now, anytime that there's a grant, I always tell people that there's 3 key areas. Number one, what does it fund and what do I have to provide? We've covered that. Number 2, am I eligible? Well, we've covered that. The third thing, and to me, a critical part of it is how do they determine the winners? Well, USDA is always very clear on providing a scoring criteria for the grant, and this is no exception. So with MPEP Phase 2, there's 100 points that are divided up. First of all, there's 10 points on the alignment and intent of the grant. Are you expanding your operations in a local market? Are you accommodating different species? And they put a lot of emphasis on this one of trying to make sure if you're a cattle only one, if you're going to be able to start doing pork, or you're going to start doing small ruminants or, whatever, that's going to help you out. And expanding the volume, expanding that throughput. Your market impact, are you going to be providing more animals from local producers? Again, accommodating different species and providing fair prices to the folks that you're sourcing from. The next 2, I always say, even if you don't have to do a full feasibility study, this is where they are going to determine, are you financially viable and is it achievable? So 20 points on your budget and your work plan. Is it realistic? Are you going to be able to accomplish what you propose to do? And the technical merit is, again, do you have a realistic schedule? Do you have qualified people? Do you have the access to water and sewer, electricity? If you're proposing to do things, do you have the 3-phase power? All of those things that are required. They put 10 points emphasis on providing well-paying job and benefits. And depending on the size of the program that you're at, you may even be under Davis-Bacon requirements for your workforce requirements. The environmental, 10 points. This is where they want to know that you're going to advance the climate smart objectives of the administration. How are you going to handle your waste management and your energy efficiency technologies? And then your community support. This one is they definitely want you to get a letter from local or state leaders talking about the importance of your project. But they also, it'd be very helpful to get letters from your local associations and your stakeholders you're going to be buying from. They also, in this, then allow the administrator to award up to 15 additional points for projects that increase geographic diversity or serve underserved producers, have some other facets that tend to make them unique. So the RFA has a section on there that talks about this scoring criteria. Now, one of the slides I may have dropped off here, and I want to emphasize this, is that you are limited to 35-page application. They encourage you to use a template that they provide in the RFA. Again, you can click on that. It brings up the template as a Word document. The template is 15 pages. So that means you're limited to 20 pages for your narrative and your other information. Now, it's important to note that your letters of support, your feasibility study, your business plan, those do not count against that page limitation. So don't limit yourself on the letters of support and the like that you get. Those are very important. That 20-page limit, if you're using the template, or the 35-page overall, is just for your narrative, for the executive summary, for responding to some of the questions that they have in there. So there are a lot of resources that are available to help you as you develop your grant. The technical assistance network that we have, we're here to help. And if you have not filed for technical assistance yet, please do that. We'll talk about that in a second. But within our website, we have a directory of consultants that can help you with grant writing, can help you with feasibility studies, help you with asset plans. We have information on pertinent grants, not just MPEP, but other grants that are out there. We have information on the marketplace that if somebody's writing a feasibility study for you, they can go in and download stuff that can help, put in some of that 30,000, 25,000 foot view on the marketplace. And we have a lot of other resources in our toolkit. USDA also has resources available here. And then it's important to note that Flower Hill Institute is going to have 2 rounds of office hours. So if you're in the middle of applying for the grant and you've got some questions, there will be one on September 27th and one on October 26th, 4 o'clock Eastern time for both of those. You can register for those on this link. So I said at the beginning that among the other resources that are out there is the Meat and Poultry Intermediary Lending Program. This is a program in which USDA Rural Development has given out funds to nonprofit lenders and state agencies to set up pools or to expand pools for revolving loan funds for low interest loans to expand meat and poultry processing capacity. And there are 2 of them that serve the New England area. There's Coastal Enterprises, Inc. out of Maine. They received $8 million in funding. They are just in the process of setting up their program. You can reach out to Bradley Russell, the executive director of that program, for information, or you can go right to the CEI Maine website, and they're just starting to stand up some information. And then Berkshire Agricultural Ventures in Massachusetts, they have about $840,000 that they're putting into a revolving loan fund as well. And Jake Levin there is the contact person. I talked to both Jake and Bradley yesterday. They are both just standing up their programs right now. They have available funds. They are very anxious to visit with folks about that. So this is something that if you're going for MPEP where you have your 30%, you can use the MPILP funds as part of your other 70%. So how you stack all of this together, can help you get a more viable package and reduce your out-of-pocket cost. Now, just to emphasize once again that we within the technical assistance program are working on a number of other priorities to help you out, to help you with your workforce, to source the workers that you need for your project, to help you with your financing, the intermediary loan program that I just talked about. There's the Rural Energy for America program, which is an ongoing program for loans and grants that in your facility, do you want to bring on solar or other low energy, technologies? That program is open. FSA has the Farm Facility Storage Loan Program that if the project you're doing is on farm, there's monies that you can access for coolers, delivery trucks, and other things. And then I X'd out the Food Supply Chain Guaranteed Loan Program because unfortunately that fell victim to the debt ceiling negotiations a few months back. And then we're here to help you as you develop your project. How do you use the whole animal? How do you help get some value out of the whole animal? So those are the things that our technical assistance network is set up to help you with. And then finally, if you haven't applied, please submit a request for technical assistance either at that QR code or at the link here on the screen. We receive that. We'll get back to you within 24 hours. A lot of times we'll just email you and say, we need more information. Give us a few more specifics so we can help you out. If you're just looking for information, we'll try and send that to you as quickly as we can. But most importantly, we try and connect you with someone to provide the technical assistance that can be helpful for whatever you're doing. Putting together your grant, designing your facility, developing your business plan. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. And with that, that's my information. I also included the contact information for Chris Roper, who's my fellow regional director. We're both available to help you. We keep our bags packed. We've been on the road a lot. We may have blown through our travel budget, so we may not be able to travel as much as we like, but we really want to get out and sit down with folks and to work with them as directly as possible. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen here. I hope.
Perfect.
Okay.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. And I'll just note that this is being recorded and we'll send out, I'll ask Dave if we can send out a copy of the slides and we'll compile all the information and links if you didn't catch them there.
So.
Maybe turn it over to Mariah for a little bit more Vermont-centric support.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Julia. Yeah, so real quick, I'll just share a little bit about kind of the READY program and what we do, but my contact information will go out in that follow-up email as well. So if folks have particular questions, you can feel free to reach out and I'll drop a website link in the chat as well. But basically, as I mentioned before, I manage the Rural Economic Development Initiative at VHCB. We like to call it READY, lovingly for short. We love our acronyms. But basically what we do is we provide grant writing assistance to small communities and working lands businesses in Vermont to help advance economic development. So we work with programs like Dave's that are federally funded and kind of at this significant size that it would be difficult for kind of, one of our small Vermont businesses to get through that process without some additional technical assistance support. So what we can do is that, our program, we have funding available to basically provide consulting services to support folks in applying to these grants. So that might look like hiring on a consultant who can help with the actual grant writing, who maybe can help with some of the financial pieces or putting together a budget. Or in this case, where a feasibility study and or a business plan may be needed, we could hire a consultant as well to work with folks on those kind of activities. Our maximum award right now is about $7,500. So if there was, cost beyond that for, let's say, a feasibility study for, a particularly large business doing a significant project and that costs more than $7,500, that's where a business may need to kick in some funding as well. And the other key thing to note for our eligibility, basically any business in Vermont that is, working in meat processing would be eligible in our category for trying to advance the working land sector in Vermont. But the other key piece for eligibility for us is around population of where that business is located. So for us, the small rural areas of Vermont that we are working in are places with populations of less than 5,000 people. So it's a pretty quick search to figure out if your town has less than 5,000 people, and that's most of the state. But in the instance that someone may not be eligible for ready resources given where they're located, we're happy to work with you to try to identify a consultant that you could develop a private contract with, or the folks at Flower Hill Institute have a great list of folks to reach out to as well in that instance. So like I said, I will drop a link to our website in the chat. We do have a pretty quick application for folks to fill out to request this type of assistance and working with a consultant that our funding would pay for. But I think, and Julia will speak a little bit more to this, but I think we're kind of asking folks to funnel their initial inquiries about the program and share their interest in both applying to this grant, as well as potentially applying for support through the READY program, funneling all of that communication to Julia initially, and then we'll be able to kind of sort out what the best order of operations is and how we can best get in communication with you folks. So I'll leave it there for the moment. And then, yeah, Julia, if you want to chime in at all on the agency's behalf.
Great, perfect. Well, thank you both so much for doing what feels like all the work on the ground here. So the Agency of Agriculture is really happy to support kind of finding the right resources. I'll just clarify that the agency can't, support grant applications or all the technical assistance, but I'm really happy to help folks kind of figure out where to go or who's the right person, whether it's Dave or Mariah or somebody else. So I will pop my information, my email in, and of course we'll include that in the follow-up email. So really welcome folks to reach out. It's very helpful to us if you reach out with your interest and any questions, just so we can do our best to kind of help guide folks, make sure people are getting their questions answered, so we have a sense of the interest in Vermont. You don't need to, but it's certainly helpful, and we'll do our best to kind of make sure everyone gets all their questions answered. We are really asking for folks to reach out with their general inquiries or interest, getting either in touch with Dave to figure out about TA or getting in touch with Mariah to figure out about grant writing support within the next week. So that would be by Thursday, the 21st. It's a tight turnaround, but that's what we need to kind of help figure out how we can best support all of the businesses to kind of know where people are at. It can just be a very general, like, I'm interested and I have, a million questions about it. We can just kind of help get the process started. So I think we'll open it up to any questions. I believe that what I just did allows people to unmute themselves. I believe that you can also type something into the chat if you're either unable to unmute yourself or have a question. And we'll just hold space for any questions from the few folks on the line.
Couldn't have answered all your questions.
It's a lot of information in there. And I also just want to say we really recognize that this might not be the right fit for everyone or for the scale of businesses in Vermont. We hope that it is, and we hope that the hard work of Dave and his team, and of course Mariah, is helping to make this more accessible. But we also really welcome, or I will say I welcome any feedback around if this is not the right fit for you, and kind of why. Is it the scale? Is it the eligibility? Is it the dollar value? The match required? That's also helpful information from the agency to kind of compile feedback to the best of our ability, either within the state and hopefully beyond, of just to help make the case be known of kind of what Vermont needs. So also really welcome that to my email as well.
And let me just add, because I know that some of the folks, there were folks in Vermont that applied for MCAP and have applied for some of the previous grants. And once those get awarded, our technical assistance network is here to help you with the implementation of those. So if you're, designing a new facility, or you're looking at trying to figure out where to bring in some additional coolers, whatever, we're here to help you. No cost. Our contract runs through December of 2026. So we're here for the long haul.
Great. It's incredibly helpful. Perfect. Well, if there's no questions, we can end a little bit early. Again, we'll send out information in a follow-up email. Feel free to reach out to any of us with any questions ASAP, and we look forward to helping as best we can. Thank you again, Dave and Mariah. I appreciate your time.
You bet. Thank you.
So thank you,
Thanks, all.
folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.